December 16, 1773, a bone-chilling winter evening in Boston. The air at the harbor was thick with the scent of salt and a growing storm. But this wasn't a storm of nature. It was a storm of human defiance. Imagine a world where your every move is controlled by a king thousands of miles away, where your hard-earned money is taken in taxes for laws you never voted for. This was the reality of the American colonies under British rule. And on this cold night, that reality was about to be shattered. This is the story of the night America changed forever. By 1773, the relationship between the British Crown and the 13 American colonies had reached a breaking point. King George III and the British Parliament were desperate for money after years of war. Their solution? Tax the colonists. They taxed paper, glass, and paint. But the biggest spark of anger came from something the colonists loved most: tea. The British passed the Tea Act, granting the East India Company a monopoly. They wanted to force the colonists to buy British tea and pay a hefty tax on it. But to the people of Boston, it wasn't just about the money. It was about a principle. They raised a cry that would echo through history: no taxation without representation. If they had no voice in Parliament, Parliament had no rights to their pockets. Three ships, the Dartmouth, the Eleanor, and the Beaver, sat in the Boston harbor. Their holds were packed with 342 massive chests of tea. The colonists demanded the ships leave without unloading. The British governor, Thomas Hutchinson, refused. On the night of December 16th, over 7,000 people crammed into the Old South Meeting House. The air was electric with fury. Samuel Adams, a leader of the Sons of Liberty, stood before the crowd. He knew the time for talk was over. He spoke the secret signal. This meeting can do nothing more to save the country. A war cry erupted from the back of the hall. The revolution had begun. Out of the shadows emerged a group of men, their faces smeared with soot and coal dust. They were dressed as Mohawk Indians. This wasn't just to hide their identities from the British soldiers. It was a symbolic choice. They were shedding their British identity and embracing the spirit of the American wilderness. They marched toward Griffin's Wharf with silent precision. There was no shouting, no looting of other goods. They had one target and one target only: the tea. With axes in hand, they boarded the ships. They hauled the heavy chests onto the deck, smashed them open, and dumped the contents into the dark, icy waters of the Atlantic. For 3 hours, the only sounds were the rhythmic thuds of axes and the splash of tea hitting the water. Over 92,000 pounds of tea, roughly 45 tons, were destroyed. In today's money, that's over $1 million worth of property gone in a single night. As the sun rose the next morning, the Boston harbor had turned into a giant, salty teapot. The British were humiliated and furious. In retaliation, King George closed the port of Boston and passed the Intolerable Acts, hoping to crush the spirit of the rebellion. But he was wrong. Instead of breaking them, his cruelty united the colonies. This act of defiance at the harbor was the spark that lit the fuse of the American Revolution. Less than 2 years later, the first shots of the war would be fired at Lexington and Concord. The Boston Tea Party wasn't just a protest. It was the moment the colonists realized they were no longer British subjects. They were Americans. It proved that when a people are pushed too far, they will stand up, they will fight, and they will change the world. Because sometimes, to build a new nation, you have to start by making a little bit of noise and a lot of tea in the harbor.